Coming at you live from my very dirty garage. Today we are going to be doing rear struts on a 1999 Ford Contour. So I'll do my best to try and get as much information into the video as I can. So we'll just go from there. Okay, so obviously the first step is to get the car jacked up, secured on a jack stand as we have here, and get the tire off, which we've done. So next step is going to be start taking this thing apart. Alright, so the first thing that I've done here is pried the little clip loose so that I can get the brake line removed from the strut tower. So I'll go on ahead and get that one pulled out the rest of the way. And it's out. So I'm sure there's some other, improved way to do it, but I did it the way that worked for me. So there you go. Alright, so I'll go on ahead and get that brake line popped out of there and kind of moved out of the way, and we can move on. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is disconnect the sway bar link from the sway bar. So I've already got it cracked loose, but unfortunately, since I only have two hands, I'm going to have to do it off camera. But anyway, I used a 13mm wrench on the back and a 15mm socket on the front and just kind of broke it loose. Okay, so I did go on ahead and use the jack to get the car jacked up just enough that I could go on ahead and get this popped out. And we're ready for the next step. Alright, now before we get too deep in here, I was going to try and skip not having to disconnect the brake line, but I think that would be stupid because I don't know, I just don't think it's going to work when I actually try to drop down the strut. I could be completely wrong. I've never done struts on this car before, so I'm just going to be safe and unhook it. Alright, so next step was removing the rear tie rod from the wheel spindle, and it took a little negotiating, but I got it out, got it loose, got it almost out. It was a 15mm, so I'll go on ahead and finish getting her out. Alright, so we're disconnected, and at this point I believe I have everything disconnected down here that I need to in order to be able to remove this bolt next, which would then drop the spindle down so that I can get to where I can pull the strut out. So I still have the two bolts up there that hold the strut onto the body of the car. Other than moving jack around and manipulation, I should be able to get it, I think. If not, I'll definitely jump back in and correct where I was wrong. This is an 18 millimeter, by the way. So I'm going to keep working on this bolt and check back in when it's out. All right, we got it out. All right, so what I'm doing at this point is just pounding on the spindle to drop the strut out, or I guess drop the spindle out from the strut. So. Doing the old taparoo. All right, so we are disconnected, and I've got the you know, maybe just to jack the car up just a touch. Let me see here. Just go ahead and do that. Just a little bit more. Just to get that mostly out of the way. And then we'll keep going. I think the next step here at this point is to get the two nuts up in the top of the shock tower and go from there. Okay, so as you can see, I've got one bolt out and I've got one more to go, and the setup that I'm using is a 10 millimeter socket, and then I've got two extensions on a 3/8 drive ratchet, and they were a little tight to get, but overall they weren't too bad. And this car is originally from out west, whereas I am in the Midwest. So one of the things about the Midwest is lots of rust from heavy salt usage, but you can tell on this car that it doesn't have a whole lot of rust. And like, even looking underneath it, you know, you have the standard rust like on the cross member there, but like looking at the frame rails, and it's really minimal, I mean, if any. So that's been definitely an advantage. Nothing has been too terribly tight or rusty. But anyway, I'll get that second bolt and we'll move on. Alright, now obviously I'm not using a strut clamp, which I don't think I need to with what I'm doing, but if I had one it would probably be a little bit easier. So right now I am going to try and pop the strut out. Alright, well, I don't know if this is by the book, but we have this strut out, and what I had to do here was this little guy right here was holding me up. So what I ended up doing, because I couldn't get the strut clamp to work, was I loosened this bolt here, and then there's another bolt under here that I loosened just a little bit to get me enough wiggle room where I could then take my big pry bar and just kind of pry it out. So the next part is going to be figuring out how to get the new one back in. Okay, so we have new and old. One thing I noticed is that the new one, the mounts for the ABS and the brake line are both bent. I don't need the ABS. But anyway, I'll try to straighten this one out a little bit, and then we'll get her slapped back in. Alright, so here's what I ended up doing. I ended up taking this bolt out completely and loosen this one up quite a bit, and it's given me enough room where I can get the strut back up in there. So we'll go on ahead and get started on that. And probably what I'm going to do is just get the strut back up in there and get the two bolts back in, and then I'll turn the camera back on and kind of show you guys what I'm doing here. So alright, so here we are. Got those two bolts in, got the new strut in. Neighbors mowing the yard, so sorry about that. And I got the two bolts for the cross member out and was able to just pop the strut right back in over it. So now I'll start putting everything back together. Alright, so I have the bolts back in for the cross member, and now what I'm going to do is basically just use the jack here to get you on the other side here to jack it up and try and get the strut back to where it needs to be on the spindle. Get the spindle bolt back in and get this thing the rest of the way put together. Alright. Okay, just a quick little what I'm doing method thing here is using the jack, and I'm jacking it up a little bit. You see that the strut is moving up. I don't know, maybe you can see it. And then I just do a little tappy tap, and it slides back down in, and I repeat the process until I get it to where I want it. Okay, torque spec according to the book, 52 to 72. I have my torque wrench set at 68, just for the hell of it. And we're good. Alright. So, next step is I'll get the link reconnected, I'll get my tie rod reconnected, get my brake line reconnected, and then we should be done. Then we would repeat the process on the other side. Alright, well, kind of hard to see here, but next step is to torque the tie rod bushing. And then after that, it's going to be the stabilizer bar. So the torque that the book says is 75 to 102. So we're going to do it at 95. Alright, and I'm going to say that we're done. We got everything torqued. Everything's put back together. You can see I have some zip ties here. My little clip broke. So we'll just have to use that for now, I suppose. I'll get the tire back on and We'll go to the other side. I probably won't worry about filming the other side, since it would pretty much be the same thing that we've already seen. So there you go.